Hello. We'd like to take you through an in-depth exploration of the control voltage features of the MPC X. In this video, we'll use the MPC X to control some modular gear. We'll begin with the basics and then move on to some more esoteric applications from there. Each of the 8 3.5mm CV ports outputs a 0 to 5 volt positive DC voltage and can be configured in a multitude of ways. If you'd like to create a standard monophonic East Coast voice, you'll find that the MPC X will handle this task admirably. We will start there. Creating this sort of voice was not a priority for me as I was assembling my system, so we'll have to make do with the bits that I have. It will suffice for our purposes. For this example, I'll use an oscillator, an envelope, some VCAs, a mixer, and the CV-controllable filter pedal. I'm using a Max 25 today as a controller. You can use whatever keyboard is available to you or simply play on the pads. The MPC X has 2 5-pin MIDI inputs as well as MIDI over USB. We'll start by creating a CV track. To create a CV track, select the CV icon here. A CV track has up to 4 hardwired attributes that you can engage if you choose. CV, which is 1 volt per octave pitch, gate, which is high when you're pressing a key or pad, mod wheel, and velocity. They're mainly for mapping standard keyboard controls to control voltage. Of course, you're free to use those as intended, in your own way, or not at all. You could, for example, create 8 CV tracks that only use the pitch attribute. Here I have the CV port configured to output 1. It is controlling the pitch of my oscillator. Again, the CV is 0 to 5 volts, so we'll get 5 octaves of precise tracking. On the MPC X hardware, the usable notes correspond to pads C5 through G1. Notes played outside of the 5-octave range are rounded to either the highest or the lowest available notes. Pad perform mode is another great way to use the pads to jam with predefined scales. The gate port is assigned to CV2. This behaves as you would expect. 5 volts for note on and 0 volts for note off. In this type of voice, you would typically use this to trigger an envelope or use it as a simple note on-off control. I'm using it here in conjunction with an ASR envelope that's opening and closing the cutoff frequency of this low-pass filter. Mod wheel is assigned to CV3. This will send a value between 0 and 5 volts depending on the position of the mod wheel on your MIDI controller. If you're using only the MPC X hardware for your sequencing, you can use the associated Q-Link knob for your mod wheel control. More on Q-Links shortly. In this patch, I have the mod wheel controlling some vibrato via an LFO and a VCA. As I bring up the mod wheel, the VCA opens, allowing the LFO to pass through and affect the pitch of the oscillator. Maybe you'll want to use it to control the wet-dry mix of an effect, or introduce some FM, or anything you can think of. Finally, velocity is assigned to port 4. This will give you a voltage between 0 and 5 volts depending on how hard you strike the pad or keys. I'm using this voltage with the VCA to control the volume of the oscillator before it gets to the filter. You can define your note priority behavior here as well. You have highest, lowest, and last. I'll choose lowest because that's how my favorite monosynth behaves. If we check out the grid view, you can see that I've programmed some notes in already. Not bad, but I'd like to remove the mod wheel automation that I've recorded. I can do this by pressing the erase button and selecting automation on the touchscreen, and then do it. Now we could create another CV track and assign its 4 track attributes to outputs 5 through 8, but I'm going to build on this patch. The Q-Link knobs are another way to manipulate CV. They can be used in conjunction with or independently from the track-based controls, meaning that if I have the mod wheel port set to output 3, I can use both the mod wheel and Q-Link knob 3 to affect output 3 simultaneously. By pressing the program button above the Q-Link knobs, we can see that the first 8 knobs are assigned to the 8 CV outputs. We also get a readout of our Q-Link values. I'm going to use outputs 5 through 8 to control and automate some parameters in our current patch. I've got outputs 5 and 6 going to the attack and decay of my envelope. My oscillator has both the main and sub-oscillator out, so I'm going to use outputs 7 and 8 to control the cutoff for each channel in my mixer, which is currently in low-pass filter mode. This will allow me to control and automate the tone of my oscillator. Let's record some automation. There we have it, a basic East Coast patch with some automation. Let's get a little creative with a new patch and try some sampling. This time we're going to try something a little different. I'm going to use a Q-Link knob to create a melody and sample it for use in the clip launcher. In this patch, I have a quantizer, an oscillator, a low-pass gate and VCA, and an envelope. For our track attributes, we'll use output 1 for gate and output 4 for velocity. The outputs are set up as follows. Output 1 is our gate. That will trigger the envelope and trigger a new note on the quantizer based on its CV input. Output 2 is going to the quantizer CV input. This is the voltage that will create our melody. Output 3 controls the decay of our envelope. Output 4 is our velocity, and outputs 5, 6, and 7 are controlling some of the parameters of the oscillator. I'll start by populating the step sequencer with events. I'm using a 16-step sequence for simplicity, but you can have as many bars as you like. I have full level engaged, so all the steps are entered as full velocity, but I can adjust the velocity of each step to give our sequence some life. I'll remove some steps here to get an interesting pattern. I can tweak the decay of the envelope to add more grooviness to the pattern. I like an element of chance when I'm creating melodies. The beauty of this configuration is that the pattern of the melody is determined by the step sequencer, and the notes are generated by turning the Q-Link knob. As I mentioned, I've sent Q-Links 5, 6, and 7 to some of the parameters of my oscillator. I'm going to automate those parameters. Now as I adjust the decay, you can hear some interesting tonal changes as well. Now I can automate the decay if I want to and jam a bit on the melody. One option now would be to use automation to record a melody, but instead I'm going to jam a bit and sample that jam. Now I have the option to grab the bits that I like and arrange them afterwards. I can grab a handful of 4 or 8 bar loops and throw them into the clip launcher, or chop them up onto pads. Once I do that, I'm free to tear down this patch, build something else, sample that, rinse, and repeat. I've chosen 3 different 4-bar sections for my sample and loaded them into the clip launcher. Now I can jump back and forth between my favorite bits of my sampled jam. I have a drum track ready to go. I'll add that in, and voila! concludes our control voltage demo. If you'd like to find out more about the MPC workflow, I'd encourage you to check out our YouTube page. Thanks for watching.